You go to bed tonight. You pull up your blanket, check your phone one last time. Then, check it again for no reason. As if the internet became a different place in the last 12 seconds. Your room is securely locked. Your air conditioning is humming. And your white noise machine is playing a track that simulates a gentle jungle environment to help you pass out. Now, remove the blanket, remove the phone, remove the walls. What you have left is your naked body, a pitch-black savanna landscape, and something heavy moving out there just beyond where you can see. So, what was the plan? Today, a bad night means you woke up at 3 a.m. and checked your phone. Back then, a bad night meant something checked on you, with teeth. Every year, millions of people spend an absurd amount of money on custom memory foam mattresses, sleep therapies, and gadgets to drown out the night. We tend to view that sudden rush of panic when a floorboard creaks in the dark as a modern defect, a glitch in an overstressed, urbanized nervous system. But that's backwards. For most of human history, fear of the dark wasn't a childish phase. It was one of the most adult, highly successful things your brain could possibly do. Here's the thing nobody talks about. You are not the descendant of a fearless, muscular, prehistoric superhero who ruled the Pleistocene with an iron fist. You are the child of the most anxious, hyper-vigilant primates to ever walk the earth. You are here today because your ancestors were the ones who bolted upright when a twig snapped in the brush, while the brave, deep sleepers who didn't worry became a casual midnight snack for a big cat millions of years ago. We like to tell ourselves a glamorous story about how humans have always reigned supreme at the absolute top of the food chain. We buy into media that shows early humans as natural-born predators, effortlessly running the planet, but the fossil record shows something much more uncomfortable. For a massive chunk of our evolutionary timeline, our branch of the family tree wasn't the diner. We were the dish. And the proof isn't just a theory. It's stamped directly into the bone. I have stopped here at the boundary of the next topic, which will transition into the forensic fossil evidence of early human prey status. Let's look at a cold case from a cave in South Africa, dated to about 8 million years ago. The victim wasn't a modern human, but a small-brained hominin ancestor. What survived wasn't the scream, the panic, or the flesh, just a piece of a skull known to science as SK-54, and it has 2 neat round holes punched into the bone right at the top of the head. For years, nobody was completely sure what made them. Then, a researcher picked up the fossilized lower jaw of an ancient leopard found in the exact same layer of earth. The jaw is cataloged as SK-349. When they took that jaw and lined up the teeth with the holes in the skull, the match was perfect. The distance between those canine teeth was exactly 33 millimeters. It fits down to the micrometer. This is a forensic receipt of a very bad day. It means a leopard pinned this creature down, clamped its jaws across the back of its head, and dragged it up into a tree to peel the meat away in peace. Trees were supposed to be our refuge. They weren't. And if you think the ground and the trees were the only problems, you forgot to look up. Consider the Tong child, a fossil of a 3-year-old Australopithecus from 2.8 million years ago. This toddler weighed maybe 26 pounds. When scientists looked closely at the skull, they found delicate scratches and deep puncture marks inside the eye sockets. It turns out these marks perfectly mirror what modern crowned eagles do to monkeys when they hunt. This child wasn't stalked from the bushes. It was hunted from a completely silent sky. A shadow crossed the sun, claws pierced straight through the eyes, and the toddler was gone. Nature is incredibly rude like that. So, for millions of years, the message from the planet was clear. If you are a slow, weaponless primate, you are essentially a walking protein bar. But as our ancestors kept evolving, they didn't grow bigger claws or sharper teeth. Instead, they started changing how they handled the pressure. And their first major stand happened around the one thing every living creature needs to survive, but where the stakes were the absolute highest. Drinking water is a completely mindless task today. You walk to the kitchen, or you grab a bottle at a convenience store without a single second thought. But 1.8 million years ago at a place called Olduvai Gorge, getting a drink was like playing Russian roulette. Imagine a Homo habilis individual kneeling down by a muddy waterhole. The surface of the water is perfectly flat, reflecting the pale afternoon sky. Then, the water explodes. You just met Crocodiles anthropophagus, a name that literally translates to human-eating crocodile. This was an absolute monster of a reptile, stretching up to 25 feet long and sporting two distinct horns right over its ears. We know they were wading in the shallows because researchers found fossilized foot and leg bones from our early ancestors, labeled OH8 and OH35, that were explicitly crushed and gnawed on by prehistoric crocodile teeth. But let's say you have great reflexes, you pull your foot back, escape the jaws, and scramble up onto the dusty bank. You think you're clear, you're not. Recently, scientists used deep learning AI models to analyze the precise shape of bite marks on other fossils from that exact same gorge. The AI confirmed, with over 90% accuracy, that while crocodiles owned the deep water, ancient leopards were waiting in the bushes right next to them, launching brutal strikes directly at our ancestors' heads and jaws. If you went down to get water back then, you were walking into a multi-platform ambush. Not ideal. If humans had stayed this helpless, our branch of the family tree would have been chewed to dust right there. But about 2 million years ago, a new ancestor called Homo erectus showed up. And they didn't just learn how to run away from the bullies. They figured out how to steal their lunch. But Homo erectus noticed a very specific design flaw in the scariest predator on the block, the saber-toothed cat. Cats like Meganterian had those famously terrifying, long, thin canine teeth. But those teeth were also incredibly fragile. If a saber-tooth tried to crunch through heavy, frozen bone, its main weapons could snap right off. Because of this, they would kill a prey animal, delicately slice off the softest muscle tissue, and abandon the rest of the carcass, almost entirely intact. This left a golden opportunity. We often think of eating leftovers as a cowardly, passive act. But our ancestors turned it into a high-stakes tactical heist called power scavenging. Instead of waiting for the predators to finish and leave, a group of humans would actively march right up to a fresh kill while the cat was still eating. Computer simulations have actually modeled this exact standoff, and they found a very specific magic number, 10. A single human trying to pick a fight with a saber-toothed cat is just giving the cat an extra side dish. But a coordinated group of about 10 individuals changes the math completely. By screaming in unison, throwing heavy river stones, and waving branches, 10 humans could successfully bully a massive apex predator right off its dinner without losing a single life. They would rush in, use sharp stone tools to hack off the high-calorie limbs, and get out before the cat could regroup. Annoying? Highly. Effective? Incredibly. But their real evolutionary breakthrough wasn't a weapon you could throw. It was a weapon that sat on the ground. We tend to look back at the invention of fire as a purely culinary breakthrough. A primitive stove used to make mammoth steaks easier to digest. But that's looking at it backward. Fire was actually the first deadbolt lock on humanity's bedroom door. Most nocturnal predators have eyes that are highly adjusted to the dark, making them incredibly sensitive to light. A roaring fire acts as both a physical and psychological barrier. It is bright, unpredictable, hot, and generally terrible to put your face into. By keeping a fire burning at a central base camp, humans created a literal line in the dirt. Inside the light, you were safe. Outside, the eyes were still watching. But for the first time in history, the dark had to think twice about crossing the line. Secure behind this new invisible wall, humans finally stopped sleeping in trees and stepped down onto the dirt. But surviving the night was only the first problem. Once our ancestors secured the ground, they began developing technology that did something completely unprecedented. It turned our predators' own bodies into a punchline. Around 300,000 years ago, a new player entered the evolutionary game, Homo heidelbergensis. These ancestors weren't just running away or making noise anymore. They were master engineers. Deep in a coal mine in Schöningen, Germany, archaeologists dug up a series of wooden spears that had been preserved beautifully in anaerobic mud. These weren't just random branches sharpened on a rock. They were meticulously carved from slow-growing spruce wood, with the heavy center of gravity intentionally shifted toward the front to make them perfectly aerodynamic. In fact, their design matches the physics of modern Olympic javelins. Predators win when they get close. They rely on that immediate, explosive ambush where they can clamp their jaws onto your throat. But when a human is holding a fire-hardened wooden spear that is 1.8 to 2.5 meters long, the distance equation flips. Suddenly, you can puncture a predator's chest before its claws can even reach your skin. It was an elegant solution to a very messy problem, allowing these ancient humans to defend themselves effectively against the scimitar saber-toothed cat, Homo latidens. But the absolute ultimate evolutionary insult was found right alongside those spears. Imagine a craftsman sitting by a lake, working on a stone tool. To sharpen a flint hand axe, you need a hard tool to chip away the dull edges. Normally, you would use a heavy river stone, but at Schoningen, researchers found a unique knapping hammer made entirely out of a bone, and not just any bone. It was the front arm bone of a scimitar saber-toothed cat. Think about the sheer logic of that. Humans didn't just survive the scariest monster in the forest. They took the monster's own arm, dried it out, and used it as a hardware tool to smash rocks and build even more lethal weapons. Talk about a dramatic shift in corporate hierarchy. But as the climate shifted and the world grew colder, the battleground moved from open lakesides into the darkest, tightest spaces on Earth. And that's where our cousins, the Neanderthals, took tactical planning to a terrifying new level. During the late Pleistocene, the European climate turned into a brutal, frozen nightmare. If you wanted to survive the savage Ice Age winters, you couldn't just huddle around a campfire on the open steppe anymore. You needed premium, heavy-duty real estate. You needed a cave. But there was a catch. The absolute best caves on the continent were already occupied by a biological tank. The European cave bear, Ursus spelaeus, a giant beast weighing up to 680 kilograms. For decades, pop history loved to spread a highly romanticized myth about this relationship. Old documentaries claimed that Neanderthals were deeply spiritual primitives who worshipped these beasts, carefully arranging their skulls in stone boxes as part of a mysterious cave bear cult. But modern forensic analysis broke that illusion completely. The truth is, Neanderthals weren't religious fanatics. They were cold, calculated, realists. They didn't want to pray to the bear. They just wanted its warm clothes and its cozy house. And they secured both by exploiting a massive biological vulnerability. Neanderthals would track these massive beasts and wait. They wouldn't dare attack a fully alert, well-fed cave bear in the middle of summer. That would be an excellent way to get turned into a pancake. Instead, they waited until early spring. This was the exact moment the bears were at their absolute weakest, entirely drained of energy, and groggy after a grueling winter hibernation. At sites like the Rio Secco and Fumane caves in Italy, the bones tell a gruesome forensic story. Archaeologists found heavy butchery marks and bone-cracking scars, specifically on cave bear fossils dating to the spring. Neanderthals would slip into the pitch-black caverns carrying blazing torches and fire-hardened spears, trapping a sluggish, disoriented giant in a tight, enclosed space with absolutely no exit. They would drive their weapons into the bear's soft tissue until it collapsed. By weaponizing the bear's own biological clock, our evolutionary cousins walked away with the ultimate jackpot: high-calorie fat, a heavy fur coat to stave off the frost, and a heavily fortified stone apartment. But while the Neanderthals were busy winning the war for Ice Age real estate, our direct ancestors, early Homo sapiens, were facing an entirely different kind of emergency, a silent, metabolic crisis hidden inside their own organs. And to survive it, they had to sit down and negotiate a business contract with their oldest, most ruthless rival. Imagine being trapped in a freezing winter during the last Ice Age, roughly 20,000 years ago. You've managed to catch a few lean, winter-starved animals, so your camp technically has a pile of meat. But here is the catch. If you try to live off it, it will literally kill you. This is because of a rigid metabolic wall known as the protein ceiling, or rabbit starvation. The human liver is biologically limited. It cannot safely process more than 35 to 40% of its daily calories from pure, lean protein, without causing a highly toxic buildup of ammonia inside your body. If you attempt to survive on pure lean meat alone during a harsh winter, your organs will shut down in agony. To survive, early Homo sapiens desperately cracked open heavy bones with river stones to suck out the fatty, high-calorie marrow. But they were still left with massive mountains of lean red meat they literally couldn't swallow without poisoning themselves. Old romantic myths claim that wild wolves became our friends by hanging around campfires to beg for scraps. and eat leftover bone shards. But that makes no sense. Ancient wolves were hypercarnivores. They had zero interest in chewing on dry, empty bone crumbs. The truth is much more pragmatic. It was a commercial trade agreement. Humans had a toxic surplus of lean meat they couldn't digest. Wolves were freezing, starving, and possessed unparalleled night vision and sharp tracking senses. So, an Ice Age hunter cut a giant slab of extra lean meat and threw it straight out into the snow. A cautious gray wolf stepped out of the freezing dark, swallowed it, and stayed. It didn't instantly turn into a friendly pet. It was still a sharp, highly dangerous wild beast. But it lay down at the edge of the firelight and pointed its ears out into the deep dark, listening intensely for the footsteps of giant cats or rival predators. It was the first biological security contract in human history. Excess protein in exchange for night shift defense. And this bizarre alliance didn't just change the map of the Ice Age. It directly wired the final pieces of the modern human psyche. Which brings us right back to your bedroom tonight. You are lying there on an expensive mattress, tucked safely under a blanket, with a smart lock on your front door, and a machine casting white noise across the room to mimic a comforting jungle environment. But if a single floorboard creaks in the hallway, your chest immediately tightens. Your heart races, and your adrenaline spikes. Today, we treat that nighttime anxiety as an annoying modern defect, a product of our overstressed urban lives. But it isn't. In the wild, absolute silence is the most terrifying signal nature can send. It means every bird, mammal, and insect has suddenly gone quiet because a massive apex killer is stalking right through the brush. Your nervous system isn't glitching when it panics at a quiet sound. It's just running a flawless, highly successful security program that is over 2 million years old. When humans left the safety of the trees to sleep on the open ground, we had to completely re-engineer our biology to survive the night. We couldn't afford to sleep for 15 hours in a deep, vulnerable stupor like other primates. Instead, we evolved to become the most sleep-efficient primates on Earth. We compressed our total sleep time and dramatically increased our proportion of deep, highly concentrated REM sleep. Your brain packed your sleep cycle into a tight window to minimize the exact amount of time you spent as a completely helpless passive target in the dark. And while you are locked in that REM state, your mind constantly runs simulation scripts of being chased, ambushed, or attacked, actively priming your evolutionary reflexes just in case you need to wake up fighting. To be clear, not every sleepless night is ancient wisdom. Sometimes it is just caffeine, or modern stress, or a body that simply needs medical care. But that sudden, deep jolt of alertness you feel in the pitch black is older than the bedroom you're sleeping in. You are the living lineage of the ultimate underdogs. You are here today because your ancestors were the anxious, hyper-vigilant cowards who woke up when the branch snapped, while the brave, deep sleepers vying for the top of the food chain didn't make it to sunrise, and you don't have to look very far to see the proof. If you have a dog, maybe a golden retriever or a rescue pup sleeping peacefully at the foot of your bed, take a look at them. That animal isn't just a cute pet you bought for emotional companionship. They are the direct, living receipt of the most successful commercial trade agreement in human history. They are the descendants of the wild wolves who agreed to guard our ancestors' campfires in the freezing Ice Age winters, taking the lean meat our human livers couldn't digest and turning it into a 24-hour night shift defense system. Your body is still keeping watch. It just never got the update that the leopards are gone. So don't judge your nighttime panic too harshly. You're not broken. You're remembering.